Hello, everybody. This is Pastor Wayne Moore, your host for Real People, Real Voices, and I'm so happy to be co-hosting with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. David Green of Purpose of Life Ministries. We're here today to have a great time to let you know that we're still making it through COVID-19. But I want to acknowledge our sponsors, first of all. Lee Costello and Crawley are going to be with us today as a sponsor, Fervent Care Christian Academy. Not only that, we also have the Marion County Public Health Department and also Owls Modern Clothing and Shoes. And with that, we'll be right back. This is Pastor Wayne Moore, and we're back here on this with Real People, Real Voices. My co-host today, sitting in for James Jackson, Pastor David Green, Purpose of Life, Concerned Clergy. And we also have our executive producer, Curtis Bakers, with us as well. But we're happy to have Attorney Nathaniel Lee. Brother Lee, how you doing today?
Doing great, Pastor Moore. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, we're here to celebrate you, and you're going to give us some information about what's going on. You're running for the National Bar Association president. Tell us something about that.
Well, I currently serve as vice president of the National Bar Association of Finance. In essence, we're doing something unusual this year. Normally, I start a campaign. Last year, I did a 3-day campaign and got elected vice president. But this year, because of the pandemic, we're dealing with unprecedented type of issues. And so as a result, the National Bar is doing a virtual convention. Now, that's to my detriment because all of a sudden we have about 4 or 5 people running and it's a computer convention. So it's just a matter of people logging on the internet, and an in-person convention would favor me and I could easily win because you get to talk to people, but now we're doing the internet. And so it's going to be a little bit more difficult for me because the other candidate started campaigning last year, and I just thought it was a waste of time to do a whole year because the National Bar, even though it's important, is a volunteer position. And we do great things, but at the end of the day, I run a law firm.
Okay, that's great. But we're proud of you here in Indianapolis. I think that's it's going to be an honor to have the national president of the Bar Association as a resident of our state, not only our state, but our county and our city. Dr. Dave Green, you have any questions for him?
Sure. Attorney Lee, what's your plans as you become president? What direction you want to take the National Bar Association in?
Well, there is a series of things that we must deal with. The number one issue facing us today is police misconduct. And I'm trying to get a case, a writ, before the U.S. Supreme Court in the case of Day versus City of Indianapolis. Terrell Day was a 18-year-old teenager that was killed by Indianapolis police officers, and he died by what's called positional asphyxiation. In other words, they put handcuffs on the teenager so tight, laid him on top of the metal handcuff, and caused him to die by suffocation. The autopsy showed that he died, and what made it more egregious is that when they called the sheriff department to pick up this teenager, the sheriff recognized right away that he was in distress. Now, these grown IMPD officers, for whatever reason, they tortured this kid and let him die. Well, this issue of qualified immunity came into existence back in 1967 and was modified by 1987. And what it does, though, is that it shields police officers from civil liability, even when they committed criminal offenses. So one of the issues we're dealing with the National Bar is the issue of qualified immunity. We favor legislation to overturn this draconian law. Also, we got some support with Senator Mike Braun. The second issue that we're dealing with is that we must look carefully at judicial and executive level appointments. We've seen the Justice Department become the Unjustice Department. We've seen a Justice Department that used to be non-political, now dealing with issues that we think is going a little bit too far. Also, one of the pinnacles of democracy is that no man is above the law. And we've seen a moral ethical, and legal decline of this core principle of democracy. We see now that people who are connected with a person in charge get preferential treatment under the laws. We see interference with investigation, and it's unprecedented. And so the National Bar condemned recently William Barr's handling of the Justice Department. We felt very strongly that he's gone too far in making the Justice Department a personal law firm for the president. That's a mistake. We're not a banana republic. We are the United States of America, and we used to be the pinnacle of the democratic process. Now we're operating like a banana republic. Shame.
Yeah, yeah. How do you feel? And I want to tag it with Dr. Green. In times like this, and I hope that you win. And so I'll say the incoming president of the National Bar Association. These are tough times to lead lawyers in this country. And are you up for the task?
Yes, I am. We have a number of things that we have to deal with. One of the key issues is that we've done so poorly in terms of minority in the judiciary, but we see a radical departure in terms of how you nominate and appoint federal judges. The second aspect is that we've seen a radical departure in the Department of Justice. And so we have to try to navigate our way into that realm or the panacea in terms of the justice system in our country. We have been locked out. The current administration, out of 200 federal judges, there were one African-American federal judge appointed. Meanwhile, we're almost 14% of the population, but we do not represent a fair and adequate representation in the current Justice Department, nor to the federal appointment. So we have to deal with these issues head on. They're tough issues, and the country now, we've seen an unprecedented show of support around the country for fundamental changes in our democratic process. Everybody recognizes that discrimination has been present for a long time. We've seen the erosion of democracy, but at the same time, what's good about America is that the majority of America, they support meaningful change at this point in history, about 2/3 of America. So I think that's a wonderful thing that's come out. Now, I don't favor the negative part, that is that the looting and things like that, but I do favor very strongly peaceful protests. I think it's been a positive for our country.
Yeah, Dr. Green, you have anything?
Yeah, so obviously you see the National Bar Association being very strategic in terms of police reform.
Yes, yeah, I participated recently in a forum with the mayor of Bloomington, and we had an ad hoc committee here in Indianapolis. Some of the issues that relate to police reform has been misconstrued. First, let's clarify what the misconceptions are. There is a movement called the Fund Police Department, and that's got the wrong connotation. The people really are not saying get rid of all police officers. They're saying that let's allocate the resources correctly. Like, for example, the police officers are social workers, marriage counselor, drug unit, you name it. So what they're really saying is let's have counselors deal with the homeless people. And so when you have a homeless guy walking around, instead of calling the police, let's get a counselor out there. Let's see what can we do to help that person get off the street. Maybe that may be a shelter, that may be an employment. When you have domestic situation, we should have marriage counselor. And so all these situations shouldn't be the type of events that lead to arrest or death. And so we have to reallocate these resources to make sure that police officers are dealing with the protection aspect and not the social work. And that's what the fund really amount to, but it's been misconstrued and misinterpreted. And so I think that we need to maybe change the name to say that let's reallocate resources where they need to be allocated. We need to have a greater participation by our religious community. Pastors provide greater counseling sessions than anyone else. And so we need to recognize these pillars and make sure that we're on the right path.
All right.
That's a great stopping point right there. We need to go to a break. and we'll come back and we'll recap some of the things that you just talked about. We'll be back right after these messages.
This is Pastor Wayne Moore, and we're back with Nathaniel Lee, our super lawyer in our city, along with Dr. David Green, who's helping us co-host today, and our executive producer, Brother Curtis Baker. Brother Green, you have anything you want to throw at Brother Nathaniel Lee?
Sure. We wanted to hear a greater definition of the National Bar Association, the American Bar Association, the various bar associations out there, and just give us a better description of what the National Bar Association will be doing or has done.
Well, that's a very good question. From a historical standpoint, we know about the Civil War, and by 1871, we had the passage of certain civil rights legislation in our country. But the passage of civil rights legislation did not lead to desegregation or integration. So in 1925, the National Bar Association was formed because Black lawyers did not have the ability to be members of white bar association. And in 1932, the National Bar Association held its annual convention here in Indianapolis at the Madam Walker Building. It was hosted by the famous Madam C.J. Walker. And since then, the National Bar Association has been a leader in the civil rights litigation in this country, starting with Sweat versus Painter, 1949 case, I think ultimately cited by 1952. The year might be off a year or two, but that case dealt with the integration of the University of Texas Law School. In that particular case, Thomas Sweat had the qualification to be admitted, but they did not want a Black to be in the Texas Law School. So they formed Black Law School in Texas, Texas Southern Law School. But that case was represented by NBA members, and it led to the famous case of Brown versus Board of Education. So the same legal concept in the Sweat case became the same legal argument in Brown versus Board of Education. That is that separate but equal is unequal is the theme. So going forward, Thurgood Marshall was a famous member of the National Bar Association. So was a guy named Barack Obama. And so over the years, the National Bar Association has advocated civil changes that positively impact African Americans in our country. We worked hard to get fair justice in prison system, housing. So you run the gamut of things that affect our community. We've been at the leadership role in that capacity. The American Bar Association, I'm a member of the American Bar Association. The current incoming president of the American Bar Association is a former Reggie Turner, is a former president of the National Bar Association. In today's climate, we have membership in both the White Bar and the Black Bar Association, but our interests slightly depart on certain key components from time to time. Our goal is to try to act as social engineers in our community to advance things that are relevant. Like, for example, community policing affect Black males more than any other demographic. So we have to be at the leadership role in that capacity. I've taught seminars starting back in the 90s on police misconduct. I wrote a manual and taught lawyers how to deal with this. Also, we had other issues that are unique. In our city, we had, back in the 80s, as you recall, we did not have any Blacks on the board of directors here in Indianapolis. So I was the vice president of the NAACP. I bought stocks in all the corporations. We learned their financial issues, and we started fair share negotiation with, like we negotiated the model agreement in the country with IP&L. That led to hiring Black managers, then they managed to nonprofits, and it changed the corporate dynamics of Indianapolis. So as a Black lawyer, our role is slightly different because we have a demographic that has been the victim of domestic terrorism, Jim Crow laws, lynching. So our role is slightly different than the majority of the Bar Association.
Okay. All right. And those are the things that you hope to tackle if elected to that position, and put emphasis on those areas that you just mentioned. You've done a lot of work here in the city of Indianapolis, and we need to be proud of you for that. But what do you see happening as it relates to police reform in Indianapolis? What would you like to see?
Well, there's a, Pastor, that's a great question. Let me tell you what is missing and that what most people don't realize. I've been working with the police department in the litigation since 1984. And in 1978, we had a consent decree that increased the Black officers. And then the Reagan administration attacked it. So I got involved working with the city to ensure that we had a hiring of Black officers. Now, at one point in our city, Black officers could not arrest white citizens. I mean, a lot of people may be surprised to hear that, but they didn't have the legal right to do so. That's our history. And so what's wrong with policing? Here's the problem. All these cases where police officers have killed Black males, and whether I've won them in court, when I do those jury trials, like in the case of Jackson versus Sharp, my closing argument wasn't that there was an accident of shooting. When I did the closing argument, I say, pull that gun, put it in the head, and he murdered this young man. It was murder. And so what happened? We get a big record verdict. The city pays out tax money, and Wayne Sharp got promoted to sergeant. So what has happened is, no matter what these police officers done to Black males, they feel no remorse because there's no punishment. They get promoted and sometimes get medals. In each of these cases where we've shown where they killed these, there's no repercussion. So one of the things we have to do is make the process fair. Lawyers get sued for malpractice, doctors get sued, but police officers, there's no consequence. So we should have a process where they pay part of the judgment, they lose their pension right when they kill these folks. That's one of the things we have to correct. We shouldn't force taxpayers to bear the brunt responsibility of murders, right? And that's what the process, that's what's wrong with the process now. The city is paying out money for a bunch of criminals. And I don't think that's right. So they have a pension, so we need to have laws that say that when you go out and do something wrong, there's got to be a punishment. There's got to be a consequence. And that's one way you do it. And the second thing, though, is that you have to look at police officers that file resisting, fleeing, and battering officers type charges. Back in the 80s, we worked with the city to start tracking that. And that's an important piece of evidence that you must collect. See, when a police officer is frequently getting involved with battering on an officer, that means that he's escalating the situation. You know, I mean, that's a telltale sign that there's something wrong with policing. I had a group of 20 Black officers, Pastor, in my office one day, and I asked them, how many of you have fired your weapon at a suspect in the line of duty? In the room of 20 Black officers, only one officer had ever fired at a suspect in the line of duty. So that told me that these officers had skills to de-escalate situations that don't lead to deadly force encounters. And so, but we need to keep statistics on things like that. So what happens is when an officer in the city of Indianapolis engaged in wrongful conduct, his record is erased on those issues and they don't hold it against them, so they get promoted. One of the cases that really bothered me today is a case of Garvin versus Wagner. Garvin was murdered by Officer Wagner back at 25th and Sherman. Wagner is now a captain with the department. And in my case, I proved that he committed cold-blooded murder. I proved it. And it bothered me that now he's in the newspaper as a captain. Now, that is what's wrong with our system. We're promoting people that murder Black males, and I think it's wrong. And so when we get into policing, the typical citizen don't really know the actual problem with the situation. Also, the merit board. Let's talk about that. The merit board doesn't have an ethical rule. So you could be on the police merit board and represent police officers. That's wrong. We should have a rule that says that if you're making money like a lawyer or real estate person, a police officer, you should be not able to serve in that capacity. So even when the chief discipline officer, we see in many cases they're acquitted, right? So these are some of the things in which I think that we must deal with right away.
Okay, Lee. I think that Nathaniel Lee, I think you've got a point. And but a lot of people, and I don't know if you agree with this, Dr. Green, are afraid to talk about these specific issues. I don't know how much time we got.
Well, we get about 25 more seconds.
Okay, but let me just say this. I guess if we get you back, we can talk about this again, but it's just been a blessing to know that you're moving in another level as it relates to your profession and also still here in Indianapolis working for us. This is Pastor Wayne Moore of Real People, Real Voices, along with my co-host, Brother David Green. Thank you so much for being with us, Attorney Lee.
Thank you.
Pastor Wayne Moore, I'm back, Real People, Real Voices. Happy to have my co-host, Dr. David Green, and then our executive producer, Curtis Baker. Man, we had a great show with Nathaniel Lee. Dr. Green, tell us what you think about that.
I'm excited about the National Bar Association and what they will be attempting to do, because much is needed in terms of police reform, and Attorney Lee would be great at the helm of the leadership to get some things done on a national level in that area.
I think so too. Brother Curtis, what do you think?
Oh, it's so great to have giants in your community. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Someone that can represent you like that. And Nathaniel Lee, Attorney Lee, is one of the great giants in our community. And I commend him for what he's doing. And we as a community need to get behind him.
And some people are afraid to talk about the issues he's talking about. And he needs a lot of prayer. And not only that, but he needs a lot of support, especially when you're talking about those issues that are before us right now in our society. A lot of people are scared to talk about them, but it seems like, yes, and we're going to be praying for him. Well, you know, this has been Real People, Real Voices. We're so happy to come to you by virtual contacts and in relationship with one another. I want to thank you, Dr. David Green, for being with us today, and Brother Curtis for sitting in, for both of you sitting in for James Jackson, who is our host, and I'm his co-host. Just happy to be here. And I want to thank those brothers who are behind the scene, making sure that we're zooming in to 1.5 million people across our state. So God bless you. This is Pastor Wayne Moore signing off. Have a great day.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.